what President Trump is saying here is it's time to look into them and say, and hold them accountable for what they said.
No, the problem is they were looked into. They were investigated. It seems Comey and Letitia James were both investigated, and the U.S. Attorney's Office found there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. It's not about looking into it. They did look into it. So obviously there is a ton going on in the politics meets the law arena in the past couple of days. In particular, the president's efforts to coerce the attorney general into indicting his political enemies. And I was asked about this on Good Morning America in a very short period of time. And so I wasn't able to really dig in the way I'm going to here. But let's be clear. This is an outrage. And it's not remotely comparable to any allegations about the Biden administration. All right? Bill Barr was accused of being politicized as the attorney general. Merrick Garland was accused of being politicized as the attorney general. Let's put those aside for a moment in terms of whether you agree with it or disagree. In both of those cases, the allegation was that the attorney general had made decisions that people thought were too politicized. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is, in particular, a U.S. attorney in Virginia picked by the Trump administration who didn't indict the president's political enemies, primarily Letitia James and James Comey. And so the president fires the guy and now publicly puts pressure on Pam Bondi and appoints one of his loyalists in her place, I guess with the instruction to make sure you indict. There is nothing in recent memory remotely comparable. I mean, the only thing remotely comparable is Watergate. That's ultimately what got Nixon impeached. But it just seems now no one cares. And I say no one, I mean, where are the moderate Republicans? Where are the reasonable Republicans saying this isn't okay? It's not okay. I mean, just picture if Biden had sent out a message on social media criticizing the U.S. attorney, a special counsel, whoever it is, for not prosecuting Republicans. He would have been impeached. This really is that bad. Does that mean everything the Trump administration does is bad? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But it does mean this is an outrage. And everyone, Democrat, Republican, should be outraged. Now, let me start by reading the statement from Trump on Truth Social. Pam, I've reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially, same old story as last time, all talk, no action. Nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, Letitia, ? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing is going to be done. And then he ends the quote. They're all guilty as hell. Of what? In the case of Letitia James, is it mortgage fraud? Because the U.S. attorney in Virginia investigated it, apparently, and didn't find enough evidence to bring a case. Now, again, you're talking to someone who is no fan of Letitia James. I have been critical of her for years for politicizing her role, for things she said publicly. But that doesn't mean she gets prosecuted unless there's evidence enough to move forward. And it seems the case in Virginia was based on some sort of power of attorney she'd given a relative, even though all of the other documents in that case referred to it as a second home and not as her primary home, which is the allegation about the mortgage fraud. He goes on to say, then we almost put in a Democrat-supported U.S. attorney in Virginia with a really bad Republican past, a woke rhino. Okay, let's stop there. So it seems he's conceding that the U.S. attorney he had in there was a Republican, but because he's not doing enough to target President Trump's enemies, he's a rhino who was never going to do his job. That's why two of the worst Democratic senators pushed him so hard. He even lied to the media and said he quit and that we had no case. He didn't say anything about not having a case in public. He did say he resigned. No, I fired him. And there's a great case, and many lawyers and legal pundits say so. I don't know which lawyers and pundits are saying it's a great case. I'm one of the people who said early on, Letitia James should be very concerned about this investigation. In part, I was saying that because I presumed if there was anything, any technical violation, they were going to go after her. He then announces who the new person's going to be. He's going to put in the spot. Lindsay Halligan is a really good lawyer and likes you a lot, referring to Pam Bondi. We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now. Now, the impeachments and the prosecutions, I mean, I know that it's so easy to just lump everything together and just make it seem like it's all or nothing. But it's not. Folks like myself who actually care about justice, who aren't rooting for one team or another, will go in and tell you which cases were strong, which ones weren't. I've been very clear in criticizing the Manhattan case and even the Atlanta case out of Fulton County. I said that the federal cases brought by Jack Smith were much stronger, in particular the classified documents case. One of the impeachment cases was stronger than the other, particularly one where they had 7 Republicans joining. So it's not an all or nothing thing, but he is demanding a prosecution here. There is a great case. Then he went on to try and calm things down with Pam Bondi, saying Pam Bondi's doing a great job as Attorney General of the United States. She's very careful, very smart, loves our country, but needs a tough prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia, like my recommendation, Lindsay Halligan, to get things moving. What we don't need is a Democrat-endorsed quote-unquote Republican. I'll be nominating Lindsay Halligan to the United States Attorney in this very important part of our great country. She'll be fair, smart, and will provide desperately needed justice for all. Now, Lindsay Halligan is an insurance lawyer who was one of Donald Trump's defense lawyers, who has never been a prosecutor, wildly unqualified for the job. She was sworn in the last hour as the acting U.S. attorney. And listen to the language that Trump uses, because it's very telling. All right. It is my honor to appoint Lindsay Halligan, who's been serving as special assistant to the president at the White House, as United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. Lindsay is a tough, smart, and loyal attorney who has worked with me for a long time. Loyal attorney. I mean, he's not hiding it. Who's worked with me for a long time, including in the winning fight against the weaponization of our justice system by crooked Joe Biden and the radical left Democrats, which she witnessed firsthand when she stood up for my rights during the unconstitutional, un-American raid on my home, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. As a partner at the biggest law firm in Florida, Lindsay proved herself to be a tremendous trial lawyer and later represented me and won in the Democratic hoax, as well as many other high-profile cases. Goes on to talk about how great she is. She's an insurance lawyer, but she's loyal. Now, the question I get a lot is, okay, so what happens if she tries to indict, which I'm confident she will. I mean, there's no other reason she's in this role except to try to move forward with the cases that thus far they have not found enough evidence to prosecute on. Well, first of all, as we've seen in D.C. with Jeanine Pirro, it is possible grand juries might refuse to indict if there's not enough evidence. Secondly, judges might dismiss the cases. And thirdly, juries might acquit. We saw this in the case of John Durham, where he brought 2 cases, both politically charged, both at least at best on the borderline legally, and juries quickly acquitted in both cases. He could say, I tried, nothing I can do, etc. But it's very important that you recognize how dishonest the defenders of President Trump are being, right? I mean, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen is a great example. This is going to be number 5. He was on CNN yesterday, and he offered this explanation for why it's okay that Donald Trump is putting pressure on his attorney general. Let's listen.
He's asking his attorney general in a public way to go after his political enemies. Very open about it. You're okay with that?
Well, I think what we know is President Trump is very open and transparent with the American people, and he speaks his mind. And that's what his supporters love about him, and that's what America loves about him. I don't think there's any question that Comey should be looked at. I mean, we just got to look at the 86 comment that he made, and when we start looking at the lies that he chose to continue with Russiagate, Adam Schiff went out while he was the chairman of Intel every single meeting and said that we had the smoking gun, and he said that for how many weeks straight? And you're going, where was the smoking gun? At some point, their actions need to be looked into, and if they did something, I don't know. This is a country that should look into it. If they did something illegal, if they were leaking classified information, if they used their position of power for corruption, then they 100% should be held accountable. And what President Trump is saying here is it's time to look into them and say and hold them accountable for what they said.
No, the problem is they were looked into. They were investigated. It seems Comey and Letitia James were both investigated, and the U.S. Attorney's Office found there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. It's not about looking into it. Anytime someone says, well, I'm just saying they should look, they did look into it. They convened grand juries to try to gather evidence. But it seems that this guy Siebert, the Republican who was in the position, wasn't dishonest enough, so they have to find someone who is just going to be loyal. And I guess that means seeking an indictment, even if they don't have a great case, even if they don't have a case at all. And then he starts referring to things that have nothing to do with the criminal investigation, right? Oh, well, Adam Schiff continued to lie about the smoking gun. What does that have to do with anything? That's like saying we're going to indict James Comer for claiming that he's got the smoking gun on the Biden family. Never had it. You could argue Adam Schiff and Comer were pretty similar in the level of their overstated vitriol, right? But I apply the same standard to both sides. And don't buy it when someone says, I just think they ought to look into it. The problem for them is they did, and they're not happy with the results. Now, Caroline Leavitt was just at the press briefing. I haven't heard this yet. So this just happened in the last hour. This is going to be number 22. And this is her talking about, she's apparently responding to a question about the Trump tweets directed at Pam Bondi. Let's listen.
Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents. We will not allow that to happen. Is the president going back on his promise?
No. In fact, the president is fulfilling his promise to restore a Department of Justice that demands accountability. And it is not weaponizing the Department of Justice to demand accountability for those who weaponized the Department of Justice. And nobody knows what that looks like more than President Trump. We are not going to tolerate gaslighting from anyone in the media or from anyone on the other side who is trying to say that it's the president who is weaponizing the DOJ. It was Joe Biden and his attorney general who weaponized the DOJ. Joe Biden used this sacred American institution to go after his political opponent in the middle of an election year. And you look at people like Adam Schiff and like James Comey and like Letitia James, who the president is rightfully frustrated. He wants accountability for these corrupt fraudsters who abused their power, who abused their oath of office to target the former president and then candidate for the highest office in the land. And I think the president is reaffirmed in those frustrations and his hope for accountability by the millions and millions of people who reelected him to this office with a mandate to demand accountability. And the president has not been shy about this, Gabe. In fact, when he traveled to the Department of Justice earlier this year, all of you were there to cover it. He said, quote, I demand a full and complete accountability for wrongs and abuses that have occurred. The American people gave a mandate to investigate and root the corruption out of our system, and that's what the president wants to see done.
So she says it's not weaponization to demand accountability from those who weaponized the DOJ. What accountability? Meaning, we're talking about a mortgage fraud investigation of Adam Schiff and a mortgage fraud investigation of Letitia James. And look, they're looking for other stuff if they can find it. But the decision to open the Russia investigation by the FBI when Comey was leading it has been thoroughly investigated and reinvestigated, including by a Republican-led Senate committee that understood why the investigation was opened. And I'm going to say this again because it's important. To those who say James Comey was out to get Trump and he was weaponized against Trump, I say to you, were you paying attention in 2016 when Comey announced an investigation into Hillary Clinton and then reopened the investigation 11 days before the election and did not leak that there was an active investigation of Trump and Russia? The FBI didn't leak it. People knew there were questions about Trump's connections to Russia, but the actual FBI investigation wasn't leaked. Comey, the guy who corrupted the FBI, didn't leak it. Not a single FBI agent or senior person who was working on the case leaked it. So when you hear them interchange complaints about prosecuting Donald Trump with crimes, ask yourself, what is the crime that they're talking about? It's a critical distinction. Now, what is Pam Bondi going to do? What is Pam Bondi going to do? Let me remind you of what Pam Bondi said when she was in her confirmation hearing. She was asked about this scenario. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, the Democrat from Rhode Island. This is number 18, his question and her response.
It would not be appropriate for a prosecutor to start with a name and look for a crime. It's a prosecutor's job to start with a crime and look for a name, correct?
Senator, I think that is the whole problem with the weaponization that we have seen the last 4 years and what's been happening to Donald Trump. They targeted Donald Trump. They went after him, actually starting back in 2016. They targeted his campaign. They have launched countless investigations against him. That will not be the case if I am Attorney General. I will not politicize that office. I will not target people simply because of their political affiliation. Justice will be administered even-handedly throughout this country. Senator, we've got to bring this country back together.
Now, I have addressed this before, and if you want to see my longer take on this, you can go to my YouTube page and find the editorial that I did about weaponization. But the bottom line is that it seems to be a weirdly accepted position that Merrick Garland weaponized the DOJ. I'm not talking about Letitia James. I'm not talking about Fonnie Willis, and I'm not talking about Alvin Bragg. I'm talking about Merrick Garland. And yet, as I have discussed on this show, there were more high-profile Democrats who were investigated or prosecuted during the Biden administration than Republicans. Can you imagine this FBI allowing that to happen? Merrick Garland didn't prosecute Donald Trump for January 6th. He wasn't going to. The left was furious throughout 2021 and the beginning of 2022. I was on this show defending Garland's decision not to prosecute. Why? Because I thought it was the best thing for the country. Does that mean there wasn't a case? No, there was a case to be made, and it's the case that Jack Smith ended up making. But the only reason that the DOJ ultimately charged was because of the documents case. They weren't going to prosecute Trump. And then he hid and lied about the documents. And so a special prosecutor gets appointed in Jack Smith, and Jack Smith makes the decision to prosecute on the cases that Merrick Garland wasn't going to. That is not politicization of the DOJ. Trump behaved terribly on January 6th. He behaved terribly leading up to January 6th. Does that mean he incited a riot? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. You got to look at specifically what the charges were. Got to look at the evidence. But most importantly, they had him on the classified documents case, not for holding classified documents by accident, the way that Joe Biden and Mike Pence did, but intentionally lying about it once they were requested and subpoenaed by the FBI. So spare me the, well, they did it, now we're doing it too. Because even if you believe that, there is no one who had any evidence that Joe Biden was telling Merrick Garland to prosecute Donald Trump. None. Zero. There is enormous evidence in the form of a social media post that Trump is coercing, pressuring this attorney general to prosecute his political enemies. Adam Schiff isn't being investigated for the comments he made about Trump. And if he is, there's no way they're going to have a case on that. He's being investigated for mortgage fraud. Letitia James is being investigated for mortgage fraud. Yes, they're still trying to subpoena documents in connection with her case. And by the way, against Trump, Caroline Leavitt has completely mischaracterized what has happened with the civil case that she brought. She's claiming it was thrown out. No, the amount of money was thrown out. The actual finding was upheld. The amount of smoke that they're trying to throw up, weaponization smoke, you got to stay focused. This is a really big deal. And let me have one final comment, because I know a bunch of you are going to ask about the Tom Homan alleged bribe. Now, on this one, I'm not going to tell you, oh, it's horrible, the DOJ shut it down. That's politicization. No, because I base things on facts and evidence. There are a lot of legal reasons why the DOJ might not want to bring a case against Tom Homan for bribery. And when I say not want, I mean legal reasons it would be a tough case to win. There's a Supreme Court case from 2017 basically saying, opening doors, access isn't necessarily a crime, even in exchange for money. It's called lobbying. Well, Dan, he got a $50,000 in cash. If that's true, that wasn't smart. And you could argue maybe that should be disqualifying for his current role. But it does not necessarily mean it's criminal. So let's be careful here. And now I've been scolding the right. I'm going to now scold the left. Be careful here in suggesting that the DOJ here is just giving Homan a pass. Maybe they are, but I don't know that we know that. In fact, I know we don't know that. Now, apparently the report from MSNBC said that people were posing as business executives, trying to win government contracts in a second Trump administration. But again, someone promising, I will advocate for you for money is called lobbying. It's not usually $50,000 in cash, but it doesn't make it illegal. And the report said the FBI and the Justice Department planned to wait to see whether Homan would deliver on his alleged promise once he became the nation's top immigration official. But the case indefinitely stalled soon after Donald Trump became president again in January. And now, you have them making the usual comments about weaponization and say, look, if he took a $50,000 in cash from undercover agents, that's embarrassing. It's not nothing. It's also not necessarily criminal.